It was one of those early summer Saturdays that just felt like a wind from the minute you woke up. Sun coming in soft through the blinds. Coffee brewed just right, and no alarms or shift calls interrupting. I had the day off, so did my friends, and after working double shifts all week, that felt like gold. We weren't doing anything wild. No booze, no blasting music. Just six tired cops sitting around a backyard grill like regular people. But, of course, someone had a problem with that. Jason's place is on a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood that's about 3 inches away from being HOA territory. You know the kind. Perfect lawns, pastel siding, wind chimes that sound like a yoga retreat. His backyard, though, solid, fenced in decent-sized deck, one of those big box store grills with too many knobs, and enough space to park ourselves with paper plates and folding chairs. Nothing fancy, just comfortable. I got there around noon, still in gym shorts and a hoodie, and Jason was already out back flipping burgers with Lexi hovering next to him, arguing about proper sear technique, like it was a crime scene. Medium rare isn't raw, Lexi was saying, jabbing a spatula at him. It's called flavor, Grandpa. Jason, who's been on the force longer than most of us have been legally allowed to drink, just grinned and flipped the patty like he was defusing a bomb. Been grilling longer than you've been walking, Lex. Let the master work. By 1 o'clock, everyone had trickled in. Mike brought chips and his usual conspiracies. Something about how Bluetooth is secretly government spyware. Vanessa brought homemade lemonade and her dry sarcasm. Tony rolled in last with a Bluetooth speaker that he barely turned on, just enough to play some old-school hip-hop under the conversation. We sat around the patio, ate too many hot dogs, and traded stories that only cops tell when they're off duty. The kind you don't say in uniform. Nothing illegal, nothing loud. Just talking, eating, laughing. That's it. And then came the first incident. It started with Shadow moving behind the wooden slats of the fence. At first, I thought maybe one of the neighbor's dogs had come out. But then there was the unmistakable click of a phone camera. Someone taking photos through the gaps in the fence. Subtle wasn't the goal. Lexi raised an eyebrow. We being surveilled? Jason sighed like he already knew. Neighbor, Karen. The name said it all. Apparently, Karen lived in a house directly behind Jason's. She'd made herself known the week he moved in, complaining about where his garbage cans were stored and how his recycling bin clashed with the property's visual harmony. Since then, she'd sent 3 typed letters over the fence, one of them laminated, all about maintaining a respectable suburban atmosphere. Today, she decided up her game. We kept eating and talking, pretending we hadn't noticed her spying through the fence like we were on a reality show. But it was only a matter of time before the door slammed behind her house, and she stepped out in full view. "Excuse me," she shouted, holding her phone like a badge. "Are you aware how loud you're being?" We paused, not because we were being loud, but because her voice was actually the loudest thing in the area. Even the birds quieted down. Jason turned, calm and polite, arms resting on the grill lid. "Ma'am, we're just having lunch." Karen's expression went sour. She wore one of those tight tracksuits that looked like it hadn't been used for actual jogging, and her sunglasses were big enough to count as shade. Her arms were crossed like she was about to write us all citations herself. "This is a residential neighborhood. You're shouting and gathering are disruptive." "We're not shouting," Tony said quietly, but he may as well have whispered into a hurricane. Karen lifted her phone. "I'm documenting this. I'll be calling the authorities if this continues." Lexi stood up. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we're the authorities." "Wrong move." Karen's eyebrows shot up like they'd been spring-loaded. "Oh, really?" she said, biting the word like a trap. "You expect me to believe that a bunch of men and women sitting around a grill in gym shorts and tank tops are law enforcement? We're off duty?" I offered, trying to keep it calm. No edge, no sarcasm. Just calm. "I don't care if you're on the moon. You're disturbing the peace. I'm calling 911. Jason stepped forward. "Ma'am, you don't need to do that. No laws are being broken here." But she was already dialing. We stood there, quiet. Vanessa sipped her lemonade. On speaker, we could all hear the dispatcher answer. 911, what's your emergency?" Karen wasted no time. Yes, I'd like to report a loud and suspicious gathering in my neighbor's backyard. There are several people, possibly impersonating police officers, and they're being disruptive. The dispatcher, bless her patience, responded professionally. Can you describe what they're doing? They're shouting, laughing, probably drinking, and claiming to be off duty cops. It's very aggressive. I looked at Lexi. Lexi looked at Jason. He just exhaled slowly through his nose. I can verify that they are, in fact, off duty officers, Jason said, clearly enough for the speaker to pick it up. This is Officer Jason Tran, badge number 3287. This is my residence. There was a pause on the line. Karen's expression wavered slightly. The dispatcher said, obviously confused. Officer Tran, are you confirming that you and your guests are law enforcement? Yes, ma'am. And we're having a private gathering on my property. More silence. Understood. The dispatcher said finally, ma'am, unless there's an active crime occurring, there's no need for emergency response. Karen's lips tightened. So you're not sending anyone? I believe this has been resolved. Thank you for your call. The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. She stood there a beat longer, like she was waiting for someone, maybe us, to fold. No one said a word. Jason just turned back to the grill and flipped a burger. Mike popped a chip into his mouth, chewing slowly like he was watching a documentary. Karen gave us one last glare, muttered something about logging a complaint, and stormed back into her house. Lexi sat down. So that was fun. Tony shook his head. You try to have a peaceful Saturday. Jason looked at me and said, dry as ever. Remind me to get taller fences. We chuckled, but the mood had shifted. No one said it, but we all felt it. That uncomfortable reminder that even when you're off the clock, someone's waiting to pick a fight just for the thrill of it. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the fence where Karen had vanished. The funny part? That was just the beginning. The afternoon settled into that quiet lull that comes after food and sunshine start doing their work. The kind of quiet where conversation fades into breeze and the sound of birds, where everyone's leaning back just a little, taking in the simple peace of being off duty and unbothered. We thought maybe that was it. That Karen had gotten out of her system. Maybe the call hadn't gone the way she wanted, and she'd move on with her afternoon like the rest of us. That hope lasted about 20 minutes. It began again with the unmistakable creak of her back door, not slamming this time. Quieter, like she was trying a different tactic. We all heard it, but no one looked. That felt like the smart play. Don't engage, don't provoke, don't give her more fuel. But then came the new sound. Click, 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 the rhythmic snapping of photos. Not through the fence this time. She'd stepped out into her own backyard and was now very visibly taking pictures of Jason's house, angled toward the deck, the grill, and, unmistakably, us. Vanessa was the first to speak. Is this woman compiling evidence now? Lexi didn't even look. Let her, not like she's catching us doing anything but chewing. I swear, Mike muttered, if she ends up on my front porch with a clipboard, I'm moving to Canada. Jason just kept poking at the grill, deliberately calm. It's fine. Just ignore her. She'll get bored. But Karen didn't look bored. She looked determined. Over the next half hour, she made 3 more appearances. First with her phone, then with what looked like a small notepad. Then she sat down at her patio table with a large iced tea and a pair of binoculars, like we were her afternoon programming. She wasn't subtle. Every move was calculated to be noticed. Every time one of us stood up, stretched, even laughed too loudly, her head would snap toward us like she was logging timestamps. It was getting under everyone's skin. Around 3 p.m., Kyle showed up again. Karen's teenage son. Poor kid always looked like he was trying to disappear into his own shadow. He came through the side gate, holding something in his hand. Another note. Jason met him halfway and took it with a sigh. Kyle gave an awkward shrug. Sorry, she made me, he mumbled. Jason nodded, not unkindly. No worries, Kyle. The note was typed. Of course it was. To whom it may concern. This gathering appears to be in violation of multiple neighborhood agreements, including but not limited to noise level, number of guests exceeding 4, and the grilling of meat products creating a nuisance aroma. Please conclude your gathering within 1 hour, or further action will be taken. Lexi snorted. Nuisance aroma? Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Guess my lemon marinade is a war crime now. Jason folded the note neatly and set it on the patio table. She's escalating. Yeah, I said quietly. And we're not giving her a reason, which is probably driving her nuts. But we all knew where this was going. The first call didn't go her way, so the next step was pressure, subtle threats, paper trails, try and make us feel like we were in the wrong. She wasn't yelling anymore, she was documenting. And that kind of slow, passive-aggressive behavior, that's the kind that wears on you, especially when you know you can't respond the way you want to. Lexi leaned over and whispered, I'm 2 seconds away from putting up a sign that says, "No Karens allowed." You'd be violating her sense of irony, Mike replied. Jason rubbed his temple and stood up. All right, I'll try talking to her. One more time. Civilly. We all exchanged a glance. Jason was the oldest among us, the most experienced, and probably the best at keeping cool. If anyone could smooth things over without igniting more trouble, it was him. He walked around the fence line and knocked on the gate between the two properties. We watched him from the yard, all trying to act like we weren't watching. Karen answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They spoke quietly at first, but it didn't stay that way. I'm simply asking you to respect your neighbors, we heard her say, louder than necessary. We've been quiet, Karen. We're not breaking any rules. You're creating an atmosphere that is unwelcoming to families. Jason, still calm, replied, We're 6 people sitting around a grill. No alcohol. No loud music. That's not exactly a rave. I know what I see, she snapped. There was a pause. I just want to enjoy my home without having to call someone every time there's a disruption. Jason's voice dropped a little. Then stop trying to police people who aren't doing anything wrong. She bristled at that. Is that a threat? No. That's a request for basic respect. He came back around the fence, shaking his head. She's not budging. Thinks we're trying to provoke her. Well, Mike said, she's not wrong that this is provoking something. We all agreed to call a day within the hour. Not because she won, but because the tension was souring the afternoon. And truthfully, none of us had the energy for an argument we weren't allowed to have. Being a cop doesn't mean you can throw your weight around off duty. In fact, it usually means you can't because you know better. Still, the next day, things got worse. Jason woke up to a printed complaint left on his front door. This one was folded into an envelope, typed in a Word template, and signed only Concerned Neighbor. The accusations were exaggerated, alleging that our group had been using obscene language, playing explicit music, and disturbing the mental peace of nearby residents. He brought the letter to our morning coffee stop, frowning as he handed it over. She's building a paper trail, he said, trying to look official, maybe hoping the HOA will take it seriously. Lexi looked at it and scoffed. This reads like a book report written by a bitter librarian. She's pushing for us to react, I said. If she can get us mad, get us to snap, then she can say we're dangerous. Jason nodded. We don't give her that. We stay cool, document everything, keep it straight. She wants control, Vanessa added. It's not about noise. It's about power. The rest of that week was quiet, but the tension hung over everything. Kyle stopped walking past Jason's house. Karen started taking her trash out in the early hours, like she didn't want to risk running into us. Every time Jason so much as mowed the lawn, she was at her window, always watching. By Friday, we thought maybe she was done. Maybe she'd lost steam or realized the police department wasn't going to take her word over 6 officers in good standing. Then came the official letter, typed on HOA letterhead, delivered by mail, addressed to Jason. A formal notice of complaint. It cited disturbance of neighborhood norms, gatherings deemed excessive for a single-family dwelling, and community discomfort expressed by multiple residents. It ended with a line requesting Jason attend a neighborhood review meeting scheduled for the following week. She's dragging this into committee, Vanessa said, reading it aloud. She's going to try to get me fined or restricted, Jason replied. What even is an excessive gathering? Mike asked. We were 6 people. She's twisting the language, I said, making it sound worse than it was. Hoping no one looks too closely, Jason rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I'm not going to miss work over a backyard barbecue, but I'm not going to let this slide either. We all looked at each other. It wasn't just about the barbecue anymore. It was about the principle, about someone who saw people she didn't like or didn't understand and decided they didn't belong. The kind of conflict that doesn't blow up all at once. It drips in, quiet, slow, calculated. It wasn't over. We all knew that now. And if Karen thought she could outmaneuver 6 trained professionals who deal with conflict for a living, she was about to learn a hard truth. We can get loud. We got ready. The letter from the HOA wasn't just a warning. It was a pivot point. Jason held it like it was heavier than paper. The way someone handles bad news they saw coming but still hoped to avoid. We all sat around a precinct break room that morning, coffee cooling in our cups, the tension quiet but thick in the air. She's not going to let it go, he said. I didn't want to believe it, but here we are. She's trying to build a case. Lexi leaned forward, elbows on the table. So what's the play now? You're going to go to that meeting and let them scold you for hosting a barbecue. Jason shook his head. I'm not letting her push a narrative that isn't true. But I also can't show up defensive. That'll only make me look guilty. She's using the rules as a weapon, Vanessa said, twisting them around to make normal stuff look like violations. Mike added, it's death by technicality. That's how people like her operate. Make enough noise, file enough complaints, and eventually someone gives in just to make her stop. But we weren't the kind to give in. We'd all dealt with people like Karen before, on the job and off. People who use systems to feel powerful, to force others to play by their script. Usually they pick targets who didn't know how to fight back. Not this time. Jason sat back and looked at us. All right, if she wants to play by the rules, then we play smarter. The following days were quiet from the outside. No direct confrontations, no raised voices, no new complaints. But underneath, we got organized, not with the intention to retaliate. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting the record straight, protecting one of our own, and making sure the truth couldn't be twisted. The first thing we did was gather information. Nothing sneaky, nothing underhanded. Just facts. We pulled Jason's utility bills from that weekend to prove there wasn't any excessive activity. We checked the local noise ordinance, highlighted the decibel limits, and even brought in a handheld meter to measure average backyard noise at different times of day. Vanessa, detail-oriented to a fault, typed it all up into a clean, logical timeline. Next came the guest log. We each wrote formal statements, complete with badge numbers, summarizing the event, who attended, what we did, how long we stayed, and what the atmosphere was like. Straightforward and honest. No editorializing, just the facts. We even got a neighbor, Mr. Perkins, an older gentleman who lived next to Jason and had been sitting on his porch during part of the barbecue, to write his own statement. Didn't hear a thing that bothered me, he wrote. Seemed like a friendly get-together. Lexi raised a good point at one of our prep sessions. This can't just be about disproving her claims. We need to show a pattern. If she's using the HOA, we show them what she's been doing. That led us to the complaint records. Jason requested a log of all the neighborhood concerns filed in the past 12 months. It was a public request. Nothing sneaky. And what it showed was telling. Out of 36 total complaints, 19 had been filed by Karen. 19. Everything from lawn furniture color schemes to a dispute over someone's bird feeder. Her fingerprints were on half the arguments in the neighborhood. Vanessa put all into a binder. Tabs, dates, supporting documents, even maps were necessary. It wasn't dramatic, but it was solid. And it wasn't for public shaming. It was simply to present the truth to people who might otherwise only hear one side. The day of the meeting arrived like a storm cloud you could see coming all week. The HOA gathered in a modest community center room. Stackable chairs, a long folding table, fluorescent lighting. A few familiar faces were there. Neighbors who'd waved politely in the past, now watching with vague curiosity. Karen was there too, seated near the front with a carefully neutral expression. She was dressed like she was attending a court hearing. Blazer, pressed slacks, folder her lap. Jason walked in calmly, wearing business casual and carrying Vanessa's binder under his arm. Lexi and I came with him, not to speak, just to show support. He signed in, took a seat, waited his turn. When his name was called, he stood up, opened the binder, and began. No defensiveness, no heat, just steady, respectful facts. He explained the gathering, small, brief, peaceful. No music, no alcohol, no late-night activity. Then he addressed the complaint directly, point by point, using the timeline and documents to verify everything. He spoke like he was giving a report, not as a man defending himself, but as someone presenting the truth. At the end, he set the binder on the table in front of committee. I understand the importance of community standards, he said, but I also believe in fairness. If neighbors are using this process to harass others with unfounded claims, that's something the board should be aware of. Karen shifted in her seat, but said nothing. One of the committee members flipped through the binder, then looked at Jason. "These are very thorough records," she said. "Thank you for taking the time." Another asked about the past complaints, if Jason had experienced similar behavior before. He answered truthfully, "Yes, but I try to keep things neighborly. I didn't think it would go this far." When he sat down again, the room was quiet for a moment. Not tense, just thoughtful. The board members didn't say much then, just thanked everyone for coming and promised to review everything before making a decision. Outside, we stood near Jason's car, the late sun stretching long shadows across the pavement. "Well," Lexi asked. Jason shook his head. "Hard to say. They won't decide today." "But they listened," I said. "And you showed them something Karen never expected, calm, collected pushback." "She expected me to come in angry," he said, "to look guilty. I just gave him the truth." Karen exited the building a few minutes later, walking straight past us without a word. Her mouth was tight, eyes focused ahead. There was no satisfaction in watching her retreat, but there was relief. She played the long game assuming no one would challenge her. But she underestimated what it means to be part of a real team. That night, none of us talked much about it. No celebratory texts, no high fives. It wasn't over yet. But something had shifted. We'd answered back in the only way that mattered, without stooping, without retaliating. Just quiet strength, measured steps, and a refusal to let someone else rewrite our story. A few days later, Jason got the email. The board had reviewed the evidence, discussed the matter, and determined that no violations had occurred. The complaint was closed, no further action required. He shared the message with us at roll call. Vanessa smiled. Nice to see common sense still as a vote. Lexi grinned. Maybe now we can grill in peace. Jason didn't gloat. He just nodded, folded his phone, and clipped it back to his belt. "She'll probably find something else to complain about eventually," he said. "But this one's over." For the first time in weeks, the air felt easy again, like we'd reclaimed a little space for ourselves, a little ground where people could just exist without being accused of disrupting the order. And for all the effort Karen had put into trying to paint us as a problem, all she really did was remind us of how strong we are when we back each other up. We didn't fight fire with fire. We used something better: clarity, truth, and quiet resilience. A week passed without a word. No notes on Jason's door. No shadow behind the fence. No sudden complaints from the HOA. It was a kind of silence that didn't feel restful, but calculated, like the pause between chess moves when your opponent's hand still hovers above the board. We didn't celebrate yet. We'd all seen too many situations flare back up just when you thought they were handled. Then came the follow-up letter, sealed, official-looking, and delivered by hand from the HOA committee. Jason opened it in front of us, standing beside the kitchen island in his home like he was waiting on a verdict. The board had ruled in his favor. The complaint against him had been formally dismissed. The committee determined the gathering did not violate any neighborhood policies, nor had it caused any measurable disturbance to surrounding homes. Moreover, the letter noted that multiple filings by certain residents may warrant closer scrutiny if future concerns arise without substantial evidence. Jason didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, holding the letter in one hand, staring at it like it might suddenly change. Then he exhaled, a slow release that came more from the soul than the lungs. Lexi clapped him on the back. Justice, served medium rare. Vanessa leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She's going to hate this. I'm not interested in whether she hates it, Jason said. I just want her to leave people alone. But we all knew it wasn't just about that anymore. It wasn't even about the barbecue. It was about drawing a line, showing that manipulation and intimidation had limits. That just because someone knows how to stir bureaucracy doesn't mean they get to rewrite the rules for everyone else. Karen's response came in the form of absence. For a while, we didn't see her at all. Her blinds stayed closed, her porch light stayed off, and her car rarely left the driveway. Kyle, who'd always been a quiet presence, walked by a few times but never stopped. Once, he nodded politely to Jason, a small, tentative gesture that said more than any apology could. Eventually, word trickled down that Karen had stepped away from her self-appointed neighborhood duties. She declined to attend the next HOA meeting. The concerned neighbors' group email she'd once run with an iron grip fell silent. No new complaints were filed under her name. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. She just stopped. For us, it was a quiet victory. But Jason didn't let it end there. A couple weeks later, he hosted another cookout. Not to provoke her, not to throw anything in her face, but because he wanted to reclaim his space. This time, he invited more neighbors. People who had kept their heads down before now accepted the invitation. They brought side dishes, folding chairs, stories. Nothing wild, just laughter, conversation, and the sound of kids playing cornhole on the grass. No one called complain. Even Mr. Perkins from next door came by, balancing a bowl of baked beans in one hand and a newspaper in the other. Heard you had a bit of a situation, he said with a half smile. Figured I'd show support by showing up. We were standing around the grill again when Vanessa leaned toward me and said, "Feels different this time." "It is," I said. "It's not just about us now." Jason had set the tone, not by pushing back hard, but by holding his ground with quiet confidence. By showing everyone that decency doesn't mean being passive, and that standing up for yourself doesn't require shouting. You just have to know where the lines are, and refuse to let someone redraw them behind your back. Toward the end of the evening, as the sun slipped low and the shadows stretched long across the lawn, Jason stood up to thank everyone for coming. He wasn't a speech guy, but he said a few words anyway. "I know the past few weeks have been tense. I appreciate everyone showing up today. Not just for me, but for this street, this neighborhood. Feels good to see people laughing in their yard again. Feels normal. And that's what this was always about. Normal life. Respecting each other enough to not turn everything into a battle." The crowd murmured in agreement, some clapping quietly. Nobody mentioned Karen by name. They didn't have to. The next day, Lexi and I met up for coffee, and she asked me what I thought came next. "Do you think she's done?" "I think she's realized she can't use pressure and paperwork to control people who won't fold," I said. "That might not sit well with her. But people like her don't usually blow up, they just recede." "And Kyle," she asked. "He's a good kid. I think he saw what happens when adults let fear run the show. Maybe he'll grow up different." Lexi smiled. "Here's hoping." We finished our coffee in silence, watching the street outside return to the same steady rhythm it had always had before all this started. Dogs being walked, lawns being mowed, kids on bikes. Life resumed. Karen still lived there, behind her tall fence and her closed blinds. But the difference now was that her reach didn't extend past that fence anymore. People had seen her for what she was, a loud voice trying to speak over others, hoping no one would push back. And when we did, not with anger, but with clarity, her volume lost its power. Jason's barbecue became a yearly tradition after that, not just for the squad, but for the neighbors. Potluck style, casual, and open to anyone who wanted to stop by. People showed up, not because of some grand victory over conflict, but because they knew the door was open and the air was free of tension. They came because they wanted to, not because they were afraid not to. And sometimes, When we're standing around the grill, flipping burgers and trading stories again, someone will joke about writing up rules for proper hot dog etiquette or issuing HOA warnings for underseasoned potato salad. But no one's watching us through a fence anymore. No one's waiting to pounce on laughter. The space is ours again. Simple, honest, quietly earned.